Is your armory losing players? It may. Is the player base of Flesh and Blood shrinking or not? Is it healthy or not? Where's it going? It's a pretty interesting topic. If you look a couple of metrics with Flesh and Blood here, you could go either way, right? You could think either it's growing or it's shrinking. And it's very, very local as well. But your personal experience could be that it's going down. And I think not only could you have the impression that Flesh and Blood is shrinking because of that, also they've reined in the print volumes, right? If you look at where the print volume was around Monarch, it kind of peaked there, I think, with a print run of just north of 200,000. And for the last few sets, that has come down significantly again. Players are not as often turning up to Armories. Furthermore, if you've looked at the player numbers of callings, they haven't really gone up. A game that does well, you would expect that the competitive scene grows. You would expect that the callings get bigger, the Pro Tour gets bigger, the World Championship gets bigger, and I don't think we've really seen that. So I think it's right for some people to question, is this game growing? Is it worth getting into or not? And I think there's a few factors to look at there. What Flesh and Blood is doing. If you have to convince somebody to get into the game, you're asking them to make an investment. And trading card games are not cheap. They are a significant investment. They're a significant amount of money for many players. And so if you want to convince somebody to join the game, well, the first question that they're going to have is this game going to be around in a year? Or are all my cards going to be worthless because the game went away and just disappeared? And I think that's a really valid concern. And I also think it's a concern that comes up again and again and again, right? This is not a question that you answer once and then it's gone. This is something that will be repeated over and over and will come up. The first factor I want to look at here is the competitive scene. So I already mentioned that. So you have callings where the numbers are, it's pretty similar. Now, there's a lot to consider there. One of the events that was very, very big was the world premiere of Tales of Aria in Las Vegas. And there's a number of reasons why that was like one of the biggest events ever. So first of all, it's the release of a new set. Hype. It is right after the pandemic and big events are allowed again. So that's hype as well. And then I also think, I'm not 100% on this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but Las Vegas is pretty easy to reach for a lot of Americans. And it's set up for this kind of event, right? So getting there is easy. They have the infrastructure. And a lot of people like going there for other reasons as well, like gambling and whatnot. So, you know, it's pretty clear that people will be going there anyway. So I don't know about you using Monarch as a reference for the printing size. No, but I want to use like the top and where we are today about the printing size, right? And that's why I mentioned that. The expectations of LSS, how fast the game is going to grow, was different at Monarch times than it is today. So I think it's fair to look at that as a data point. I think one of the bigger indicators to understand if the game is growing or not is in the competitive environment, not how many people are attending per se, but how many events are there. And compared to last year, there's a clear step up. In 2023, there were 11 callings. In 2024, in the competitive season, we have 18 callings. And I'm ignoring the battle hardens and, you know, how many other events there are, but just because I have the calling numbers and they make sense. So that is an indicator that the game is going in the right direction. Not only did they increase the number of callings, in line with the increase of the callings, they also increased the prize money. A game that is not doing well, you're not going to do that. You're not going to make the competitive circuit bigger. You're not going to invest more money if your game is not doing well. It's probably one of the easiest things to stay constant because nobody's asking necessarily for more, right? If you lower it and you say, okay, we're only going to run 5, and by the way, it's only $750,000 this year, that's like a red flag. But if you just keep it where it is, that's fine, right? Nobody's going to ask any questions. So I think that's a clear indicator that Flesh and Blood is doing well. And why do we need to look at data like this? Because LSS is a private company, so they have no obligation to release information to their stakeholders. They will still release information to their angel investors, to their venture capitalists that invested, or their seed investing, whatever, but this is not going to be public information. I think James White said they're fully self-funded at this point. So I think that's one of the first indicators why I think the game is doing well from my perspective. The second thing why I think the game is doing well is we're expanding into new territories. So just this year, Flesh and Blood expanded into Japan. That's a huge undertaking. You don't expand your printing of your product into a new language and everything that brings with it when you're not doing well. Because you need translators, you need spell checking, you need testers, you need printers, you need to do a whole different language. And even if you don't up the print run, you still have more overhead just to make that happen. And I think everybody will, especially when it comes to Japan, everybody will look very closely what is happening. Is your game doing well there or not? Because Japan is one of the biggest trading card markets in the world. And beyond that, they just recently teased that they're going to expand into Mexico. Take it for what you will, the official account posted an emoji on Twitter that was just a Mexican flag, nothing else. Your local community is steadily growing. That's awesome, Tesor. 30 players for pre-release. That is very, very good. But I think yours is growing, but others around the world are not experiencing that. So I think it makes sense to talk about the topic. You were Fortnite wait, for the pre-release? See, that's the different experiences that we have. And it's very easy to just focus on that and forget about everything else that's going on in the world of Flesh and Blood. I think there's two indicators there where I can say with certainty that LSS would not be doing what they're doing if their game wasn't doing well. I'm very confident on those indicators. There's a lot of guesswork with those, but I think the point number 3 is going to bring it home better. Like the data that I'm going to present with this, I think is going to demonstrate what I mean even more. So in 2022, there was a news article that said there were roughly about 2,500 shops in the world which stocked Flesh and Blood. If you go to the shop finder on fabtcg.com today, there are 306 pages, 15 shops per page, which comes up to just over 4,000 shops. So in the last 2 years, the numbers of shops stocking the product has almost doubled. And I think that is a very strong indicator that despite the experience that we may have locally, the game is growing. And yes, that is new territories. So, it's not like the UK scene is growing massively or the US scene is growing massively, but the new areas where the game is expanded into is accepting the game and is contributing to the overall growing of the game. Now, point number 4 is, which is going to drive it home as well, the number of armories. The game was released in 2019, right? And then in 2023, they posted that we just reached 100,000 armories. So this was late last year. November or October last year, they said 100,000 armories. So from 2019 to 2023, late 2023, 4 years from release to last year that it took them to get to 100,000 events. You have to be careful with that number because in that you also had COVID where we were locked in. It wasn't expanded to a lot of countries, but still, I think it's important to note in just 8 months between 2023 and 2024, we've added 50%. So in August 2024, we've reached 150,000 armories around the world. So we needed 4 years to get to 100,000 and then 8 months to reach another 50,000. And I think that's probably one of the strongest indicators that we could have that the community is growing. Because armories is like the lifeblood of this game. If the community or local community is dying, the armories is the first thing that goes. So we have 4 factors here why Flesh and Blood is doing well. And the final one, this one is a bit esoteric. So at the start of the year, the LSS unveiled that they have just moved into a new office. And also if you check them out on LinkedIn, you can see that their growth in employees is going up. Of course, especially the employees part, again, it's a bit iffy. But I think you don't build a new office and move into a new office if your game is not doing well. It makes no sense. In Brazil, we have 2 more ProQuest venues this year. Belo São Paulo was the second largest, 150 people. Yes, again, the community in Brazil is awesome. And I'd love to see a calling in Brazil. If you are a company that is not doing well, or even you're shaky, why would you move into a new office? It just makes zero sense. It makes zero sense. It's just one of those things that you don't do. And I think despite that being, it doesn't seem like the most obvious indicator, but I think it is one of the stronger ones. Why I think Flesh and Blood is actually on the up and up. To summarize, we've added 50% of Armories in 8 months. The amount of callings and events around the globe is growing, and the prize pool is growing in line with that. The game is expanding to new territories. LSS moved into a new office, and all those factors make me believe that Flesh and Blood is doing well. Now, if you want to look at it on the flip side, the print numbers are not going up. That means LSS is not expecting explosive growth, but that's okay, right? It doesn't need to be. In my opinion, I'd rather have slow, thought through growth, be healthy, make it a long-term successful thing, right? We don't need to be the biggest game out there. I just don't want the game to go away. And I think that's what's happening at the moment. Keep doing your thing. The last thing I want to add here is, I read an interview with James White, and he said that this is not a card company, or not a game company, something like that. This is an IP company. I'm paraphrasing, it's something like that, which is very interesting, because that means their goal here is not, like, just having this game. That's not the end state of Flesh and Blood. The end state is, in my mind, to build this into gaming, as in video games, as in books, comics, and what have you. I think that's the end goal of where they want to go. Yeah, maybe a fighting game like Street Fight, right? Or something like that. TV shows, movies, Netflix show, whatever. And I think that's the right way to think about this if you want to become one of the biggest games in the market. Now, you need to execute on that as well. In my opinion, the lore has been okay. It hasn't wowed me in any way. It needs to get better if that is your goal. They're focusing on the game first, which I think is the approach. You need to have a solid game that makes you money, that lets you build that dream. But I like that there is ambition beyond that. And you may have heard that, James White said at one point, well, we want to be $1 billion company. I think that's how you do this. So that's my thoughts on the state of the game. If you're watching this on YouTube at a later point, then I'd love for you to share your thoughts. Let me know what you think about the state of the game, where it's going to go, and if you agree with my points or not. But overall, I think we're in a good place. I have trust in the team. I think they're doing what they need to do to make this a long-term success. And for us as players who are invested in this game, I think that's all you need. Again, you don't need to be the new Magic the Gathering. You just need to know that the investment that you're making in this game is going to last you.